Hi there. My name is Shawn Cotter. I am the executive director for Wicked Queer, Boston's LGBTQ plus film festival, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with Fil Ieropoplous, who is the director of Ucronia, which is their new film that is U.S. premiering at Wicked Queer in April.
Yes,
So lovely to sit down with you again. This is our
really, same here.
second virtual chat.
Hmm.
We have the honor of showing Orpheus 2020, was it 2021?
One,
Yeah, 2021, and Avant Drag, which also was at our Wicked Queer Docs, I believe, a couple of years ago. So really excited to sit down with you. I feel like it's always a good time. Again, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. I feel very akin to you politically. Um, so tell me,
yes. I mean, we've spoken about those things before, and I was very happy that you picked this film also because we premiered our US premiered our film Orpheus with you, Orpheus 2021, and then moving to Avant Drag, and Ucronia is kind of in discussion with both those, and in a way a kind of continuation of some of the issues around those films. So
yeah, and I feel like it's also it would be a great some homework for the viewer to kind of go back and sort of experience those first two films as well. Not that it needs to inform your viewing of Uchronia, but it's a nice little sort of like again some companion homework, which I also love.
I
um,
mean, they're also done, fairly. I mean, we've been a little bit mad. We made like three films in like less than 5 years. So for our low budget DIY movie standards, this is like a killing. Like we really need to slow down now.
I mean, you're picking up to almost like a Fassbinder kind of pace, right?
Yes, yes, and we know what happened to him. So we
It's
really,
true.
yes, I really need to slow down.
So tell me a little bit about how Ucronia sort of like happened. You know,
Okay, the Rimbaud came was not in the project from the beginning. Actually, we had just done Avant Drag, and it was no, we did Avant Drag, our previous film about the drag political drag scene of Athens, and it started like touring around the world. We thought. When we first made Avant Drag, we thought, okay, this is like a very local film. Maybe it interests people around the world, maybe not, we don't know. Like we were totally okay if it was just like a document for local use. And then it explored it exploded in a way, and like ended up in lots of different places, and we were discussing a lot of things that have to do both with the sense of where we are in terms of queer cultures and relationship to politics and so on, and also in general about this idea of hope, utopia, revolution, radical politics, and like a lot of that stuff came up. And then we realized, okay, we started with a really local film, but actually we made a fairly international film. So then we thought, okay, maybe we said enough about Greece for now. Like let's park this for a minute. I think if someone wants to know something about queerness and Athens with our previous film, they would know quite a bit already. So let's park this for a minute, and let's go on to opening up some more general issues that were actually already raised in the previous film. And of course, the first thing that came into our minds is, okay, then we have to somehow discuss this return in question marks of fascism and extreme right politics all around the world. In Europe, a little bit more so, I would say, is the focus of Ucronia, but not just. There are a few things that have to do with other places in the world and the United States in particular. But anyway, yeah. So we thought, okay, this is the moment where we have to look into that, and we want to do it in a way that includes queer history and queer politics and performance and so on, because this is what we do. We don't make like historical documentaries or anything like that. And so we started thinking where should we place historically the next film then? Is it going to be in the present or is it going to be in the past? And we started thinking, okay, maybe because things are going in circles, in dangerous circles again, maybe we have to go a bit further back. So first we thought, okay, AIDS crisis, maybe back to the 80s. Yeah, but let's go a bit further back. Then we went to the 60s. Then we went to the Holocaust. Like we kept on going further back and back. And we realized that actually the best place to talk about this gap between I don't know, hope slash utopia and crushing of utopia slash ennui is like the turn of 19th to the 20th century. And interestingly, that's the moment where psychoanalysis is happening, proto-queer identities are happening, and so on. And then, almost by chance, I was reading Arthur Rimbaud's Season in Hell, which I read when I was very young, like people do, like when you're a punk, you kind of
Yep.
do that. You know that, yeah, right?
Yes.
But I didn't remember when I read it. I don't think I understood it politically so much. Like I didn't understand that it was like an almost like a proto post-colonial text, like including phrases like "my homeland causes me horror," or the French are good for nothing other than destroying things. So very, very severe, unprecedented for its time critique on nationalism. And we were like, okay, so we've got a figure who has this incredibly crazy queer affair with another poet, okay, and at the same time he has this clear critique of nationalism and ideas of the West versus the East, like purity versus barbarism and so on. And at the same time, it's written in an extremely, delirium-like experimental way. So we're like, okay, that's it. Let's see if anybody has made a feature film out of this. We started looking, we found nothing. We're like, okay, the French have been very risk averse here. They didn't want to do that. And so we're like, okay, we're going to do it. And they will probably tell us off, but whatever. And so that's how we ended up with this. And the idea was because we would never make a film about a person of the past as a biopic. That doesn't interest us. The idea was like, this is someone who comes back from the grave to haunt us and to talk with various people in the last 150 years about where are queer politics, what happened with radical queerness, is the idea of revolution still relevant, and so on.
What's really kind of profound too is the sort of the breadth of the timeline you use to sort of tell this sort of examine this would be probably a better term, because it does go from the late 19th century all the way to modern days. And I also really appreciate that you kind of talk about futurism as a movement and sort of like kind of call it out for really what it is. I guess my next question would you be, I see a lot of different sort of homages and influences in that.
Mm-hmm.
What was sort of your mood board for the sort of the look and the sort of construction of the film?
It's like 300 pages, and I think when the people see it, if you're watching the interview before seeing the film, you'll see why I'm saying that. It was a very, very long list of influences, both visually and text wise, sound wise. Like it was like we had to keep on like reducing it more and more and more to actually be able to, but it's still loads that ended up in the film. um, I I have a very intense critique of contemporary queer cinema, and sometimes people tell me, "Oh, you like nothing," and I'm like, "Well, no, actually, I like very many things. It's just not that many from where contemporary queer cinema is going." So, in a way, this film is also a kind of love letter from me to and from our team to a lot of different things that we love, and I think the 20th century is just filled with incredible, very radical queer cinema. And then at some point during the 90s, this stops or reduces, in my opinion. I guess AIDS trauma, a lot of people died, like this, the avant-garde, a large part of it, like physically died. Like this is it's a very strange, I don't think we have looked as as queer historians, I don't think we've looked into the AIDS era at all yet. Like I think, okay, I understand that it's a very traumatic thing, but we have to really look at that, because I don't think there are many examples in human history where like a whole avant-garde basically dies, and you have like a modern art movement, contemporary art movement progressing, and then suddenly it dies. It's a very strange moment. And then, so how do we respond to how did queer history respond to the fact that so many people died? Obviously it continued, but in my opinion a large part of it mostly to do, I would say, with gay males, because I think women, especially women of color and trans people, were bringing in a lot of interesting things from the 90s onwards, but especially with gay men, somehow, I don't know, maybe the trauma was too much, and there was this idea that, okay, now we have to like be really good kids and play with the system, otherwise it's too much for us and we're gonna die. And and so queer assimilation starts somewhere in the 90s. And people, there are people who believe that queer assimilation started much earlier. So someone like Gio Kengem, who is like a super anarcho-queer, basically, he thought that assimilation already started like in the late 70s or something like that. So he
I would
saw
agree with
far
that.
ahead. So,
I mean,
sorry, say again?
I honestly, I would agree with that, with the sort of the Mattachine Society and things like that. Again, the uniform of protest was suits and ties and trying to look like everyone else, trying to fit in with everyone else. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I would agree with that, but I think like assimilation sort of politic really kind of kicked off in the 90s.
Yeah.
When the whole we're gonna fight for marriage equality and things like that, so really sort of started to take the forefront of sort of gay liberation at that
And
point.
then in the from 2000 onwards, we just like queer cinema just felt, it seems, that it needs to cover this gap of all the I don't know, all the other luxuries that people had, like oh, we need more coming of age movies, we need like this, like, because obviously, the largest amount of queer films still produced are coming of age stories. Occasionally they can be okay films, but if you actually go down to the what is this film about, like, it is still this kind of, emancipating, pseudo emancipating, of course, because they're still very neoliberal and so on, coming of age stories. Almost like, yeah, it seems to me like an attempt to, I don't know, yeah, to fill in some gaps of normality that we're missing. And I'm thinking, hey, why do that? Like, it's not like the world is going so well, so you have to assimilate with the rest. So yeah, so that's why I guess, they asked me this question in Berlin, for example, in our opening there. They asked me the question of why aren't there more references from 2000 onwards in your film in terms of queer cultures. And I really wanted to say, is there really that much radical queer culture from 2000 onwards for me to quote?
Right.
And of course, I know, this is a bit of making a film is also a polemical gesture. We run a queer space in Athens. We always show contemporary works and so on. It's not like we are romanticizing the past or anything like that. But still, I think it's good to say, hey, no, we're not quite in the same place where we were 20 or 40 years ago. Like nowadays, we have openly queer people in parliaments with far right parties.
Right, which is
This,
crazy.
yeah, this did not happen before. Like maybe they were closeted, and but openly, people who say that they can combine their queer identity with being, Islamophobic and so on. This is a new thing. This is like a real contemporary problem, and so we cannot just stay to our little bubble and say, yeah, there are always nice queer things that are produced. Yes, but also right now there are also monstrous queer things that are produced, and we have to look at those.
And I think it's really great too that you sort of mention a lot, although, you know, I'm sure that the call out about not having something from the 2020s in your film. I think the taking the T out of LGBT is probably one of the most profound things of 2020's queer culture that you could call out.
Absolutely.
Because again, I don't understand it. And I just I don't quite get where people will get that sort of like that fear. They're so I guess they're so rigid about holding on to this sort of like nostalgic sort of false place that people have in society and don't see the fact that it's, you know, they come for the trans people, who's going to be next? You
Yeah,
know, they're coming for us
obviously,
all
of course.
eventually.
Of course, yeah, it's obvious, like if you understand a little bit of how history works, it is obvious. But I don't know, it's absurd to me as well. But at the same time, you know what? I'm thinking maybe as queer communities, and this is something that we mentioned also briefly on our previous film, maybe within the queer communities, we have to also start to accept that there are also bad gays, that there are also very mean people in within the queer community, and there are also people who are who like to go hand in hand with neoliberalism to become rich, to gain from whatever, from power and access and so on and so forth. And so just using old-fashioned identity politics is no longer enough.
Right.
You can be you can be gay and you can be a complete asshole, and you can be someone who is actually bad for society, and that's okay. Like maybe it's a good thing for us to move on, to say, okay, all right, so this is not really exactly the way forward, to just say, oh, but he can't be homophobic because he's gay. Really? Have you been on Grindr?
Right.
It's a little bit like that. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of tools that actually theoretically we already have. We know intersectionality. All the Black feminists have taught us this like decades ago. We know that the only way to go forward is to combine the different struggles together. Um, but we purposefully forget. And so this is it. Like, it's okay. We are seeing some people who are bad for our communities, and we're gonna move forward to not like let them basically destroy everything.
Yeah, I mean, or we can sort of turn the tide and look a little bit more hopeful. One of the sort of
I'm not saying it as a non-hopeful thing. I
no, no,
think I
no.
think being waking up to a bleak reality is not a non-hopeful thing. It's something that, okay, now we're waking up. Okay, well, waking up is good because it means you're still alive,
Right.
and so and so you move on.
No, it's funny because like being awake, like especially here in America, wokeness is always being called out. Now it's a bad thing to be awake and sort of cognizant of the reality that is around you. I don't know what kind of delusional sort of mindset people want to be in, but that's not the reality most of us live in.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things I kind of want to circle back to hope because one of the things that really sort of attracts me to your sort of film work so far with this film and also Avant Drag and also Orpheus is the themes of hope and sort of community around there. If you could talk a little bit about that, the sort of the drive to make sure that that is included in the sort of the piece itself.
This is something that we always do. Like we come from and I say we me and my working partner Fivos Lusus, who is the writer of the stuff I do, and we always work together. We've worked together for almost 15 years as a art duo. We always start from the community, and then we go into the thematics. It's really like as simple as that. We do not say we want to make this film, and therefore we will find one, two, three, five actors to fill the roles, and we will find this person to do that and that person to do this, and then we have like the professional result. I'm hoping that the things we do are still like very finished and beautiful and everything, but they're always created within the structures of communities. So, and this is very important for me because I don't the films that we make are kind of like they're evolving as we make them. And this is, in my opinion, the only way you can work to make, to like make the most out of the people that work with you, and to like really bring in loads of different elements that you didn't think about before you start collaborating. And I think Ucronia is probably the biggest of these universes, but still, these are all everybody that participates, or almost everybody that participates, are people that we've had political and aesthetical conversation for like a very long time. And this is something that I'm hoping to be able to continue working with, to continue working like that. I think it's not just that, it's not just a question of the content of the film, of each film, but it's a question of how we make the film itself. So queering the very essence of filmmaking. And I think this is, I don't know, somehow always when I thought of myself of making queer films, I never thought this means that I will do just a narrative film shot in a very narrative way and shot in a very so-called professional way, but it will be just about two queer characters. It was never like that for me. It was always like, okay, so a queer film surely must be making a film in a queer way. Okay, so for me, I don't know, somehow that was always like clear in my mind that this is what we should do. And so yeah, and so we try to queer the form, the methodologies, the structures of narration and so on, but also the way we make films. And I think this idea that community is central in queer creativity, this goes back a very long time. And this is one of the things that I think the so-called professional queer lives in mainstream places, they really want us to forget that. That idea that now someone would take like I don't know, a $20,000 loan from the bank in order to go to RuPaul's Drag Race and to have money to build their clothes, and you're thinking, wow, that's wrong. Like drag culture started as this very DIY, like full-on real thing. How can it be about loans? And so something was lost on the way, and I think that one of the things that was lost is community, and is the centrality of community, and is the idea that hope can only exist within community. This is it. Like we are, as humans, we are like social beings. Without communities, we're nothing. And the three films that I've made so far, they don't have, I don't think, the exact same amount of hope. Like I think it fluctuates between them, and some of them have more hope than others, or have more hopeful moments, and others have more melancholy moments. But I think the idea that there is a way to work things out and it's not all just bleak, yes, that's very important for me.
Well, I also think it's super refreshing as someone who had, was an activist in the 90s as part of Queer Nation, part of ACT UP, and seeing the sort of like the kind of like the forum for conversation is also, especially in Avant Drag with the dinner party, and also in Ucronia with the sort of the kind of the Apple question, I guess.
Mhm.
um, I just think that it's profoundly refreshing to see this sort of call out and this sort of recognition to give space to these kind of conversations. And I think what's really brilliant about it is sort of grounds the film in this sort of tangible reality. Which I think is again really refreshing and not seen. And so I applaud you for sort of giving that sort of space to the community to sort of speak on that.
Yeah, and because it's not like I don't think for me there is a reason to go back to queer history if we don't ground it to the present, and if we don't ground it to the not just the present but actually the participants of who we were working with, basically. Um, one can say in a way that with all the films that we made, there is like this metal layer that runs all the way through, which is that the people you see there, they might take, a lot of different roles and change and so on, but actually they are the same people, and they are like there, and they are a community, and they are friends, and they are colleagues, and they discuss, and things like, it's almost like every time we finish a film, it's like a little part of a much wider conversation that is happening around the making of the film, and each film just grabs a bit of it in a way.
And I mean, it's also great too because as someone who's not party to that sort of like community, the sort of community workings, it feels very accessible from the outside, which I think is also really great too because it kind of brings you into the conversation.
I,
Um,
th- I think I think I think COVID was in a way very central in how, at least for the reality of Athens, I would say, but also in my discussions with other people, for an almost like reminder that we have to not take this thing for granted, but actually we have to like rework it from the beginning and relearn it and respect it, and because I think, yeah, we as humans, we tend to forget and take things for granted. And actually, the creation of communities and the creation of, collaboration and dialogue and all that stuff, these are like precious, and they are, uh, you know, uh, humans work hard for them. They're not easy. Like creative families are not easy. Like I think the films that we make have this hope about communication, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of there can be conflict, there can be a lot of stuff, and I think, I don't know, somehow social media has really kind of messed up with communities and conflict, and has really like accentuated, like, or even totally accelerated the idea of, I don't know, conflict, as opposed to like I don't know, disagreement or something like that, or finding something around an issue. And I think in the post-COVID society, we have to like go back to communities, even if they're difficult, or if so, even more so because they are difficult. Because through difficulty, this is the only way we can get through to the other side of imagine a different, world or future or whatever. Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about the the choice of historical characters that you decided to sort of highlight, especially Alan Turing, who is very interesting in a modern lens with artificial intelligence and sort of kind of taking precedence and prominence in the conversation day to day in 2026.
Alan Turing is probably slightly an odd one out of the people that we chose, in terms of the idea of revolutionary potential and how much of a punk essentially he wasn't that much of a punk. Like, he was
No.
actually a much milder figure and worked with the state and so on. But Alan Turing is someone to whom history has done one of the biggest queer crimes, one person can say. Like he single-handedly stopped the Second World War, or he was, let's say, extremely central in that. And then he was, just discarded because of his sexuality by, a state that claimed itself to be very progressive, like Britain.
Right.
Okay, so we have a really huge contradiction there, and almost like, should you ever like be queer and be friends with the state? Is the question that I think Alan Turing raises, and this is a question that I think Rimbaud also has, and I think what Rimbaud does. I mean, not obviously they are like 100 years, like 80 years apart, so it's a different scenario. But in many ways, Rimbaud's question is like, what do I do when a revolutionary idea doesn't work? How do I deal with this? And which is something that we've seen now and again in human history. A bunch of people think, yes, I've got it. I know the way. I know the way for a just society. I know the way for a new art form. I know the way for technology, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, it always somehow fails because utopia just doesn't happen. It's
Right.
this thing. So the question that happens with the thing that happens with Rimbaud is he's so devastated by the way that his relationship with Verlaine went, the way that his relationship with the French Commune went, the way that he thought that he was from a small town and moved to Paris, but he found them all very pretentious and annoying and so on. So he just like basically said it's all shit. Like there's nothing here for me. Like, and so he decides to just become a hermit, like leaves completely France and goes and moves to moves to Africa, going around Ethiopia and various places, but sort of like not really being like present. Like, he forms some friendships, but generally likes to be away from everything and just keeps it like that. So pretty much, what a kind of intellectual suicide in a way that, he's like, okay, I've done my bit. Now I'm done. I just want to be like away. And so the question that I think the film raises is what do you do when, like, should you follow this kind of suicide, or should you like keep trying? And I think Alan Turing is the example, and he comes in a very strategic moment in the film, and he's an example of someone just being so unaware that the state could do that to him, that he just like says, fuck this, I cannot like deal with that, like this is like, I'm done. um, but there were other people in history who aren't like that. So the person that Rimbaud throughout the film like travels with Rimbaud in these time spaces is anarchist teacher, historian, and activist called Louise Michel,
Louise
who is
Michel.
someone who was part of the French Commune. She saw even more so than Rimbaud how they crushed the Commune. They told lies about how they were, what was happening, was sent to exile very, very far away. And still, while in exile, she made schools, worked with the people there. She came back to Europe, continued her work, like someone who is, so it's a completely different idea of, okay, you try, you fail, you try again, and that's how it goes. And so there are these two opposite positions in terms of failure. And I think perhaps masculinity, there's something about masculinity there as well, like how maybe masculinity does not allow for a failure.
Well,
And maybe,
I mean,
yeah, go on.
I would agree with that with also Marsha P. Johnson as well as portrayed too. It's like, um the whole scene of her being, I have to die again, you know, with this resolve of like the work still needs to get done, but it needs to be maybe someone else who dies this time because I don't want to deal with this bullshit.
Yeah. and she, you know, she's very angry in the film. Like her ghost is just so angry,
Rightfully
understandably,
so. Rightfully so.
but rightfully so. But at the same time, she says, well, yeah, but we'll move on, and there is, and there is we will, she says, we will continue making new lives, new languages, new, we will go on existing. You cannot erase us, basically. Maybe it won't be me, but it will be someone else. So she sees herself as a, as a continuum. Even if she's very angry, at her most angry, she still sees herself as a continuum of, like, of liberation, basically. Whereas Rimbaud kind of closes the door and says, leave me out of this. And I think Alan Turing is kind of the same sort of figure. And so the film, that's why the film brings him back from the grave, in a way, to ask Rimbaud, are you sure about this decision? Maybe you should rethink, and maybe, have a discussion with other people, see where we are. I mean, I think if Rimbaud came to the current times, oh, I don't know if he would be willing to try again, or to say, let's just press the bomb and get it over with. But in our version, he's back to speak with various people and see that, hey, you, first of all, there's a character in the film that says, hey, Rimbaud was like this ended up this sort of like hermit, but actually we're still talking about him like 150 years later. So look at that. Like, the discussion is actually, whether he wanted or not, the discussions are still on, like we're still continuing. So that's good. And of course, yeah, there is always the death of the author thing. So someone has a legacy, but then the legacy can be transformed into something else.
So I guess my last question is one of the two parts. One, what would you like to tell the viewer about Ucronia that we haven't kind of discussed before? And the second part would be, what's next for Faita?
Okay.
Well, I'm
But
assuming you're working on something next.
yes, I mean, yes. Don't tell
Fassbender,
Phoebe.
Fassbender allegories aside.
Don't tell Phoebus, because he'll kill me. And my partner is also there, Petros, and he's like, yes, we're waiting for this year in which you will take off, Phil. But anyway, back to the first question. I think one thing about Ucronia, which I'd like to say, is a very basic, pedantic thing, but actually, I would say, try, if possible, to watch the film more than once, which is a strange thing to say, but I think we are so used to the idea that we watch a film once and we've seen it, that sometimes we forget that some films cannot be really dealt with in the first time. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm selling it like that. Like,
I would
people.
agree. I would really agree with that too, because I have to say, like, I've watched your film 3 times so far, and I get a
Mhm.
little bit more every time I've seen it. So
Yeah, and I understand that someone can say that about any film, of course, but this one in particular has a sort of conceptual bombarding thing that I think, you need to, you need to work with a couple of times at least. And to make, to make this a little bit wider, I would say, don't be afraid of films that are unapologetically not easy. Like, film viewing should be something that changes your life. It should not be something that, that just happens and goes. If people are angry with Ucronia, I'm happy. I've done my job. If they are moved and love it and so on, great. I don't want necessarily for them to be angry like Buñuel did. He was like, every time something was successful, he was like, oh, another failure. Okay, so it doesn't have to be like this, but I'd rather someone be angry, annoyed, and so on, than to just like say, okay, whatever. This
art
is
should
just
be
it.
provocative.
Absolutely. It sounds like a cliche, but this is what it is, and especially now that we are really not in a very good place. It's like there's like dystopia coming from very many directions. So we don't really have the luxury, I would say, to make this kind of happy-go-lucky art. I'm not saying in any way that we should do this kind of over serious stuff. I love camp. All my films have camp elements. I'm hoping that the people can see that, but at the same time they're like full in the political debates, because this is just something that we cannot afford to just pretend, oh, everything is okay and we're at the party dancing. No, the world is like literally burning. So we have to like make provocative art and art that raises a lot of questions and so on. And in terms of the future, yeah,
It's a peak.
there is a film that yet again will be dealing with hope versus not hope. And I think the thing I can say is that it has something to do with a post-apocalyptic version of the internet.
Ooh, that sounds
So
amazing.
this one,
It's a tease.
yeah, that's the tease for now, and yeah, I think you'll like it.
I'm sure I will. Phil, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with me about Ucronia.
Sure. Thank you.
Folks,
Our discussions are always great, so I'm
yes,
happy to do that.
of course, again, I enjoy spending some time with you. But yeah, folks, go see Ucronia. It's playing at Wicked Queer, which runs from April 3rd to the 12th. So go see it. And
Have
thanks
fun.
again.
Thank you. Bye bye.